Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Natalie Butler, who serves as the Dean of Learning and Teaching at People's Music School. Natalie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. And I wanted to just share, of course, that People's Music School is one of our amazing creative partners who help us co-curate this show as well. And, you know, one of these things that we see, especially in our audience and across the field, is professional development for teaching artists, right?
Yeah.
Kind of how do we go about this? Why is it even important? You know, all of these types of things. And something that's definitely being discussed in the field and People's is really doing some great work. So I thought we'd kind of just start there. I do also want to kind of just get a glimpse of kind of how your leadership life is unfolding these days. But why don't we start with that with just professional development for teaching artists? So I think first and foremost, kind of the why, you know, why is this important and especially at this point in time?
Sure. I mean, I think even taking a step back to when I started with the organization in 2013, you know, we had been around for quite some time and had these amazing musicians who have this desire to work with underserved youth, but not necessarily the training, right? So my background is as a music educator, very distinct from that of a performance major. And so what the work that we're doing at People's is sort of at this intersection between, yes, we absolutely need these really fine musicians, but they need to be able to translate their understanding of music not only pedagogically to our students, but also understand their social and emotional development, understand how trauma impacts the lives of our students in our particular communities that we serve. And so we just noticed that there was a gap. So when I started at the school, we actually did not have any professional development. We'd have, you know, a couple faculty meetings a year, and they were very informational. Here's when class times are, here are the classes you're teaching, here's how you park at this particular community site. It was really just very logistical, but it wasn't really around what do you need to do, what skills do you need to have to really effectively serve these students. And so as we observed that gap, we realized that we needed to fill it. You know, we weren't going to ask these highly trained musicians to go back and get a degree in music education. So if we weren't going to do that, and we wanted to have the pool open to not only people with a music ed background, but people with a strictly performance background, that we needed to then provide that professional development. And so we started very small with just, you know, bringing one or two topics that were important as we began to be a part of other national grants and sort of that conversation that was happening about 4 or 5 years ago and the impacts of trauma and student learning, recognizing how critical it would be for our teaching artists to understand that. We actually started to bring in guest speakers who are experts in that area, and not just experts on children and trauma, but experts on teaching children in the arts through an art form, trauma. So we brought in some really great guest speakers to the point that in our past school year, where, you know, due to COVID, we were entirely remote for the whole school year, to the point where we actually gave about 30 hours across the entire year to every teaching artist of professional development. So again, a really tremendous growth story of 0 hours in 2013 to this, you know, significant investment. But for us, the impact we've seen has been incredible. So it's teachers who feel more empowered in their classroom. They feel like, yes, I am a French horn performance major, but I actually understand how to work with this fourth grader growing up in a neighborhood with tremendous violence and the impacts that it might have on him and how I might need to adjust my teaching. Or I understand how to take these very technical terms in music theory and translate them down to a kindergartner and effectively teach a general music class. So really providing them with the support. And the purpose of that is to empower our teachers. That's really how we want them to feel confident and excited about going into their classrooms and then, stepping in. And so that's what we found that professional development has really been able to do.
So, and it's so key, because there really is, I think this gap. And we see some, educational programs and some music schools are building this now into their curriculum, even some conservatories, et cetera. But for so many organizations, there's this gap. We've got these amazing, musicians, but with a performance background, and then this kind of assumption that, oh, well, yes, they'll just be fine in all of these types of circumstances. And
absolutely.
Youth. So there's probably, a number of, our partners or those in our audience who are looking and saying, we really might have this gap as well, or we have some of these, but we really want to do it. Is there sharing, what Peoples has done? Would you say there's kind of here's what I would recommend would be the first step? If people are looking and saying, well, we really don't have, right, as the usual reality, we don't have that many resources, we don't have like all the funding to put towards this, how could we get a first step to kind of go down this road? Any suggestions?
Absolutely. I think the first step would be to survey your teaching artists and ask them, what do you want to know more about? Because that's really where we started. We would have these sessions and ask, you have the form at the end where it's like, how did the session go? Was it helpful? And then just adding a question, what would you like us to provide you support on? That was where we started. And then I think a next step would be, particularly for nonprofits where you don't have a limitless budget and you have to be conscious of every penny, you probably have experts on your staff already. You probably already have some expertise within your faculty. So, for example, when we started to want to develop improvisation guidelines for all of our classes, we have some teachers who are excellent at that. We have a staff member who's actually going to grad school and his thesis is on that. And then he helped us develop the guidelines and he's helping us do training. So again, there's so much talent and knowledge within the existing people in all of our organizations, but sometimes we just don't think to tap into it. So I think definitely first step, the survey, second step, then looking across and seeing who within your organization can provide that. And then I think the next thing is to find networks of support. So whether it's within your own city or, you go to a conference and you connect with someone and ask them what they're doing, because sometimes you might even be able to do an exchange in that way. That there are some networks before you even have to pay this like super famous guest speaker or try to get on their schedule. I think there's a lot of steps that you can do that are simple, that are cost effective, that can actually bring that knowledge to your teaching artists that they need to be, even more effective at their jobs. And those are some simple steps that I think I would recommend for that.
And it's just being demonstrated how much of an impact this has, right? It really is a critical component, I think, these days to any program that's
absolutely
with young people. And as you kind of project out, where do you kind of see this, this aspect of professional development specifically in terms of for teaching artists? If we look out 5 or 10 years, do you think it's going to be this standard aspect? Any sense of kind of how it's going to evolve over the next 5 to 10 years?
I mean, I think as I've talked with colleagues across the field, that it is clear that all of us are sort of thinking about this. So I don't think it's going away anytime soon. And I think that there's a variety of things that if we could build stronger networks, locally with it. So like Chicago is wonderful, is that there's actually a consortium of music schools where we meet regularly. So we do share knowledge and we have that opportunity. If that existed in other cities, that would be amazing. If it existed in a sort of easy national way where people felt like, hey, I can just send an email to someone, I might not know you, but you might be able to, we can share resources. I think that would be really critically important. For us specifically here at Peoples, as I talked about this sort of growth of actually implementing professional development, then we actually started to think, hey, actually, we need to apply for grants for this. We want to fund this. We want to pay our teachers to attend PD because, again, we were 0 hours were spent in 2013. And if we want people to come and we feel this information is important, we need to honor them as professionals and be able to pay them. So then we actually started to apply for grants that would actually specifically fund professional development and getting our development team to kind of keep an eye out for those opportunities. And as we've really been more conscious about in, implementing professional development, then development has been incredible in getting the support that we need to be able to fund that. And then from there, we've been able to do all kinds of things. So now we have a professional development video library for all of our faculty and staff to use, so that if we have a professional development in 2015, new faculty that come on, if it's still relevant in 2022, they have access to that. So now we have, 30 plus videos there. We've applied to the state of Illinois, Illinois State Board of Education, to become a professional development provider, so that not only are we providing PD for our own in-house teaching artists, but we have knowledge that music teachers, who are certified in the state, could benefit from, which oftentimes, as someone who comes from a school background, you're an afterthought or a no thought for general school professional development. You're sitting there and it's all about reading or math test scores, and you're the music teacher and you want to develop too, and there's nothing for you. So we were actually able to hold our first professional development open to any teacher in the state of Illinois who was certified, which was really, it was very exciting for us to do that. And we plan to do that going forward. So I think there's a lot of room. And I think there's a lot of knowledge within all these arts organizations that I think the wider public and the wider set of teaching artists could really benefit from. I think professional development is a way to get there.
Oh, cool. Phenomenal. And I think this is just so helpful for so many in our audience and in the field. So switching gears just a little bit, thinking about your leadership now, and especially with this, historic last year and a half, just kind of wondering, and obviously a lot of our audience kind of tune in to get these, leadership kernels that, people have been really successful or deploying. Any kind of thing as you look at the past, say, 6 to 8 months and looking forward to the next 6 to 8 months, the top 1 or 2 things that you feel you're bringing to bear in your leadership role that are really key at this point?
I think, and I find this across my friends from whatever industry they're in, that when we talk about this experience of the pandemic and how it's changed our work lives, I think that regular day-to-day connection where you would just be sitting next to someone or getting a cup of coffee and just chit-chatting about an idea, bouncing ideas off of them, getting support, like that if you're working remotely, that doesn't exist. And so really having to be very conscious and very clear about, here are our goals. Here is your part in our organization meeting our goals. How do I support you? Really making time to have those conscious conversations is really, really critical, because a lot of those things would have happened incidentally when you're physically in the same room. And now, from March 2020 to this point, we have been remote. And so while there have been moments when, all of the leadership team is together, or, the program team or the development team is together, we're working, it's like, you see everyone in the square on Zoom, and we're in our houses. And it is really hard to get a feel for when, someone might need a little bit of support. So just really making intentional touch points to intentionally ask what's going on, to intentionally have, cross-team communication. That has been really important for us. I think that's been a big learning for us. And for me and my leadership, that's what I'm, working on going forward, is making sure that I do take the time to talk to each team member individually, collectively, to just, I grabbed coffee with the development director last week. We've been on a ton of Zoom calls, but just to connect and say, what's really going on in your world? I think as leaders of organizations, really making that intentional time is important remotely, but it's even important when you're in person and everyone just gets busy on their projects, and you just keep going, to really stop and take that time, because I think that builds that cohesion, builds your organizational culture, and make sure that everyone is focused on the mission and not distracted by something else or feeling isolated in any way.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much, especially sharing all of this really critical information from all of your experiences, expertise, and leadership. Natalie Butler, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our field. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
And thank you for giving people the opportunity to share. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.